Welcome to A&N News, the only TV station in 1892 devoted exclusively to the history of abolition in the United States. I'm Edward Softwater. Today, we have as our guest a speaker, former slave, and now a writer who has just published his third book, an autobiography entitled The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. Welcome to our show, Mr. Douglass. Hello, nice to finally meet you.
And hello, Mr. Soda Water.
Please take a seat. Soft water.
Oh, soft water.
Now that you're free to talk about your life as a slave, would you give our audience a little information on how the first 21 years of your life went?
Well, the first 21 years. Well, what we see there is the White House. It's a property of Colonel Lloyd. And if you look carefully, you'll see that it's a magnificent plantation, a grand plantation, consisted of 13 farms and 10,000 rolling acres of prime land. It was really quite self-sufficient. It was run by 550 slaves. If you needed anything repaired, it could be repaired there. You need something related to farming, manufactured, they could make it there.
I see. Before we go any further, would you like a glass of water?
Why, yes, I would.
There you are, sir.
And thank you, sir.
Now, is this something like an 18th century European aristocracy in the U.S.?
Well, yes, it really was. What White House did, it brought the world of Old England, 18th century, to the 19th century. Why, Colonel Lloyd himself was really a symbol of aristocracy and really the head of the slavery system.
Now, when was the first time that you noticed there was something wrong with the way you and your family were being treated?
Well, the very first time came when my grandmother, who raised me, Betsy Belly, she took me to the big house, showed me around, said, "This is the kitchen, it belongs to the master. This is a chair, it belongs to the master, and so do you." It was a feeling of dread. I don't belong to my family? It was fearful.
So then, did this give you a feeling of insecurity?
Yes, it really did. It really did. It was really very unstabilizing. I didn't know who my father was. I saw my mother rarely, and I could be taken away any time. It gave our future somewhat hopelessness.
I see. I understand that some slaves were punished, but if you knew the rules and followed them, then how could you be punished?
Rules? Rules? What rules? Why, an overseer could come to us, and in his own words, if he felt we were being insolent, he would say so. If he felt we were being lazy, he could say so. He could do anything to us that he wanted to. There were no rules.
So then there were no Bill of Rights protecting the slaves?
Well, no Bill of Rights. As a matter of fact, the laws of the Old South were really rigged to keep us all, to keep blacks in complete servitude. There was no, well, we had no right. We could be sold if our master owed money. If our master died, we could be sold in an auction. We could be sent to the plantations of Louisiana, the cotton plantations. We all feared to go there. Things were rotten, in my word. We couldn't read or write. It was against the law. We couldn't own anything. We couldn't testify in court. We had no support system. Why, we were in total servitude. And there was no freedom. No freedom. No liberty. No future.
But you did escape this servitude. Would you tell us about your plan and how that went?
Well, this was later when I was close to 20 years old. I was being farmed out to Baltimore, Maryland. And my master farmed me out to work in the shipbuilding yards. I was a caulker. And I noticed that I worked during the week and turned my wages over in the evening. Now, at the end of the week, they would expect money from me. But I had all this time at the beginning of the week, and I decided, now is my time to escape. I spoke with a friend of mine. He had a seaman's pass. I borrowed his pass, and I got on the train from Baltimore to Wilmington, Delaware. While on the train, the conductor asked to see my pass. Well, I showed it to him. Said, "There it is, sir. Can you see the eagle there?" And I put it right back. My life was in his hands. He didn't notice. So I was quite fortunate to get through by the train and go on to Philadelphia by boat, heading toward the free north.
Now, what happened when you got to Philadelphia and you were finally free?
Why, in Philadelphia, I was taken in by the abolitionists. I had the opportunity to meet William Lloyd Garrison. Yes, he was a very impressive man. He became my friend. He became my mentor. William Lloyd Garrison.
Now, did you enjoy your public speaking as a career?
Enjoyment may not be the key word. I knew that I had a duty to speak against slavery, and this is what I wanted to do. I was invited by Mr. William Coffin to come to Nantucket Isle, and this is what I did. I spoke before the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society. It gave me plenty of practice for what was to come.
Now, we have this picture here. The caption says Pendleton, Indiana. Now, would you mind telling us a little bit about this picture?
Well, I spoke at almost 100 conventions, and in Pendleton, you could see that I had learned how to talk, to give a speech, but also be aware of when a riot might break out. I even learned to give a speech while being pelted with rotten eggs.
Well, that's certainly a talent. Now, did you eventually have to pay to become a free person?
Yes, I did. It happened when I was in England visiting friends, and these English friends decided to put their money together and buy my freedom. They contacted my old master, Thomas Auld, in Baltimore, Maryland, and they negotiated with his lawyers for a fixed sum, and I believe it was a sum of $1,250.
$1,250. Now, let's see, that would be $12,500 in today's money. It's quite a sum. Now, I understand you also went to Rochester, New York. What exactly were your activities there?
Rochester, beautiful city. What I did in Rochester, I began my newspaper, the North Star, and I also began my station of the Underground Railroad. We helped fugitive slaves escape from the United States across the lake into Canada. We helped hundreds of them.
I see. Well, now, on a lighter note, I understand you met with President Lincoln. How did that go?
Well, as I said in my book, President Lincoln impressed me. He impressed me as being a man free of the prejudice toward the colored race. I really believe he was truly the first great man. President Lincoln.
Now, you went to the White House right after he was inaugurated. Could you tell us what happened there?
Yes. When I arrived, President Lincoln was shaking hands with many visitors, but he stopped. He interrupted that to call me over, and he said, "Frederick, what did you think of my speech?" And I hesitated. "Frederick, I insist that you tell me," he said. So I looked at him and said, "Mr. President, it was a worthy effort."
Now, this was the second inaugural speech. Now, this is engraved on his tombstone, and this was the greatest speech he ever gave. I mean, you're quite fortunate to have been there to see it.
Certainly.
I still haven't gotten my invitation to the White House. Now, I understand you may have been recruiting African Americans for the Union Army. Is that true?
Well, in a way, I had written in my newspaper that every black man should join the Union Army. After the massacre of the Massachusetts 54th, I met with the president and I beseeched him to provide equal pay for the colored soldier as he would for the white soldier. He agreed. If you look carefully, you will see Colonel Shaw, and the young man standing next to him is my son, Sergeant Major Louis Douglass.
Wow, you must be very proud.
Quite proud.
Now, you said in your book that Harriet Beecher Stowe asked you for information on funding education for recently freed slaves. What did you tell her about that?
Well, what I had told... 1 minute, please. I had written something down and I'd like to share it with you.
Please do.
I had written this about April 22nd, 1853. It says here, "It is very evident that Uncle Tom's Cabin, without a key, has opened the door for the general discussion, yes, the general discussion of slavery as a condition of society in its comparison with the state of things in the North and in England. The effect of the key will be to unlock every cabin and open the gates of every plantation for free and full investigation." Yes, she was a very lovely lady. But she had also written me to ask, she had this idea of donating money to a black college. And she wanted to know if I could give a name, a college that produced ministers, lawyers, and doctors. And I said, no. Why? Because this is too early for us. We are not quite there yet. What the black man needed was schools that produced building trades, that taught him how to farm. That's what was needed. And I thanked her for considering my opinion.
Wow, I understand. Now, I also have heard that you were invited back to visit your old master, Thomas Auld, 40 years later. How exactly did that meeting go?
Well, actually, I was living in Cedar Hills, right outside of Washington, D.C. And in that meeting, well, it went well. Mr. Auld, my former slave master, was about 80 years old then. We were about on equal grounds. We both had been victims of the slave system. So I asked him, I said, "Sir, what do you think of my running away to the North?" He said, "Frederick, I always knew that you were too smart to be a slave. And if I had been in your position, I would have done the same thing." He died a few days later.
Now, switching gears a little bit, your new book, The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. Now, what is the main message in this for readers?
Well, the main message of that book is that slavery should never ever be purged from the memory of this great nation. If you look carefully, you see a mother beseeching from a slave owner not to be separated from her family. My experience as a slave, the experiences of other American slaves should never ever be forgotten. That is the message of my book.
I see. Well, finally, is there anything you'd like to tell the children of the coming generation?
Well, I certainly would. You see that I'm reading, and I feel that every child should understand that they should get that education. And I would tell the kids, go to school. Never ever let anyone tell you that you should not go to school.
Thank you, Mr. Douglass. We're out of time, but next time we have you back, we'll have you talk about your appointment as minister to Haiti by Benjamin Harrison in 1890.
Well, now wait just a minute. Haiti, yes. I need to say this. On behalf of President Harrison, he asked me to speak with the dictator of Haiti to have a Navy base placed in their country. He was firmly against it, the dictator was. Hopefully, our presidents have learned that we should never get involved with a poor country, a country that has an unstable government, run by a dictator who misuses our support and possibly is suspicious of all of our activities.
I'm sure all of our future presidents will have learned that lesson. Unstable government, poor country, and dictator that are suspicious of Americans, probably not a good idea to get mixed up in. This is Edward Softwater, your A&N correspondent, saying good night.
Volumes 1 through 10, On the Road to the Abolition of Slavery. Volumes 1 and 2, Introduction, On the Road to the Abolition of Slavery. Slavery explained in the words, writing, and songs of contemporary politicians, abolitionists, slaves, pro-slavery advocates, and others. Volume 3, Politics, on the Road to the Abolition of Slavery. The Institution of Slavery and How It Was Written into the U.S. Constitution. Volume 4, Heroes and Heroines, on the Road to the Abolition of Slavery. Liberated from the shackles of slavery, countless slaves made extraordinary contributions to society. Volume 5, Obstacles, on the Road to the Abolition of Slavery. Slavery culturally entrenched and protected by religious, political, and social obstacles. Volume 6, Martyrs on the Road to the Abolition of Slavery. People black and white gave their lives in the fight for freedom from slavery. Volume 7, Kidnappers and Justice on the Road to the Abolition of Slavery. The law protected slavery, and the scales of justice were in favor of the slave owners. Harriet Beecher Stowe, The Evil of Slavery. Stowe reveals the people and the conditions that inspired her explosive novel about slavery and life in the South. Volume 8, The Legacy of What Slavery Left Behind. War-ravaged people struggle to rebuild their society and come to terms with the repercussion of slavery after the Civil War. Volume 9, Those Dedicated Angels on the Road to the Abolition of Slavery. Recognizing the work of 12 abolitionists whose extraordinary dedication helped to free the enslaved, these are the people who fought for a higher standard of mankind. Volume 10, coming soon, summer 2013. The Beginning of Slavery. Indentured servants and the transatlantic slave trade. Colonial plantations needed labor, more orphans, loose women, convicts, and Quakers than the Old World could send as indentured servants. So the colonists looked to Africa, and the transatlantic slave trade thrived for 450 years.